Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at tsf.tech. So welcome to episode 15, which is going to be the Xmas Special of the From the Factory Floor podcast. And seeing as it's Christmas and people take things a little bit less seriously around this time of year, rather than just having one or two people with me, I've actually got four. So I'm joined by Ian, Guy, Aleksa and Eric. So we're fair, we get everyone involved. And this week, as a very telling topic, which I think Ian and I might have had a slightly different opinion on if Burnley got beaten by Arsenal last night, is what's a better sport, rugby or football? So welcome, chaps. I hope you've all decided on what your point of view is.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
So, I mean, I'll just open it up. What's a better sport, rugby or football? Ian?
Very difficult. So, I think...
Not difficult.
If I was on a desert island, what shaped ball would I want with me? And I would want the egg-shaped ball. Because although I love football and I've been going to Burnley for more years than that can count, I played rugby to a reasonable standard to county level. And it's always been my first love out of sport I've played. I think there's a more camaraderie to rugby. I think there's more respect for the referees. I think there's more skill generally. And look, there's an amazing heritage to rugby in the north of England as well, with the kind of the split in 1845 between when rugby league and rugby union. So personally, the game I've played...
It's another conversation, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. The game I've played as a spectator sport and just the kind of the heritage and the camaraderie, but I do love football as well.
So I want to chip in from the other side. Is anyone a bigger football fan than they are egg chaser?
So I'm happy to offer a view on this. So just for those that haven't got the visual clue that the rest of the people on this Zoom conversation have, I've got my Man City Christmas jumper on because it'd be just rude not to on a conversation like this. That said, thank you. That said, and as Ian pointed out, by the way, it's probably all the bad things about football, the commercialism and so on, but I kind of agree with that to a point. I guess my view is I really enjoy football, clearly. That's my number one sport, without a doubt. But I really enjoy watching rugby. And I think if I had more time, I'd probably watch more rugby, and I'd enjoy going to a rugby game equally as I would a football game, probably for different reasons. They're both sociable occasions, ultimately, and I tend to go to the football with my family, sometimes with my friends. But when I go to the rugby, it's always with my friends, and I enjoy them both. I can watch both on TV. Prefer watching football again slightly, but that's just because of my upbringing. But I really enjoy watching the rugby. And again, when we've got the rugby on, if it's an England game or maybe Sale Sharks are playing, then we'll I'll get a couple of my friends around. We'll have a couple of beers and we'll watch it. And I've been to Sale Sharks as many times this season as I have to see Man City because of the lockdown, as it happens.
Not the old Edgley Park Stadium that the shed with Stockport, but the where is it? It's the AJ Bell that they are. Right
AJ Bell, yeah. It's probably the most awkward place in the world to get to from where I am based in Sandbach, because it's literally an hour and 3/4 on the train. Otherwise, you have to drive, and when you drive, the queues coming in and out are dreadful, and you can't drink, obviously. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. We ended up getting an Uber back last time, which isn't a cheap thing to do either.
Well, at least we've got a nice drink responsibly message there involved as well. So it's not just an opinion, but a nice
not port to port then.
Never drink and drive.
Yeah. So I've enjoyed both. I've had a season ticket at Turf Moor since I don't know when. I can't even remember how many games I've been to now.
You were 3 years old, James, when I bought you your first season ticket.
Well, there you go. But you also took me to Old Trafford, which obviously you learn from your sins as you grow up. But I also played rugby for years and years. Did tours. Here, there, and everywhere.
I think you guys have hit the nail on the problem here, because all of you seem to have grown up with football or football and rugby. And I grew up in a family with literally no sporting anything whatsoever. My family, in terms of uncles and stuff, are all Chelsea supporters because that's where they all come from. But, you know, my dad never talked, never watched football, never nothing. And therefore, I never got football. If it's on telly, there's people kicking the ball back and forth, and I just don't get it. And I can't get into it at all. I just don't feel it. But rugby, equally, I've never been trained into or brought up with. But rugby is, you know, there's something there. I get on the edge of my seat, and but I think with rugby, it's a pretty simple thing to follow, right? If the ball gets closer to the line, tension increases, and the closer it gets, the more the tension is. Whereas in football, it's just here, there, everywhere, all the time. It's in the goal. How did that happen? I don't really know. That's my uneducated view on the topic.
That's brilliant, Eric. I love that. The other difference to say is that football is a game for hooligans played by gentlemen, and rugby is a game for gentlemen played by hooligans, or it may be the other way around.
Yeah, well, I grew up in football, and I didn't know anything about rugby until I moved here 12 years ago now. I took the chance to learn the rules, and I appreciate rugby. And I've been to a few games, and to be honest, in all the games I've been were at Edgeley Park. So I've only seen there like 4 or 5 games. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it in a way that I enjoyed being on a cricket once. So it's kind of it was enjoyable afternoon or evening. It didn't get my kind of blood running when you go to the football match. Even if I go to see, and I've watched some games like, you know, Altrincham or Oldham at home, you still get something, but it might be based on you know, growing up with football and getting that. I think my one beef with rugby, it's a ball game, but it's not really played with the ball. It does really, I mean, yeah, that's like looking at that shape thing just jumping around without any kind of physical laws appreciated to it. I think it's been a bit tricky.
I mean, if I had to choose between going to a football match or a rugby match, I'd probably choose rugby for exactly the reason that you said. You know, it's the thing that's similar with cricket is that there's no segregation of fans. There's no, you know, it's probably less tribal than football. You know, you're never going to get a Burnley fan sat in the dark.
It's far more enjoyable. I used to work in the O'Neill's pub on St Mary's Street in Cardiff. And when like the Rugby Six Nations or the World Cup was there, and you've got, you know, this Irish-based pub, so all the Irish guys obviously turn up there, but then it's also just full of like New Zealanders and all sorts, and it's just such a brilliant atmosphere. I can't remember what day it was. There was one day, and it was like just absolute chaos the entire day. I can't remember why now, but
do you know what? It's always friendly chaos.
It was, absolutely. But then, a couple of weeks later, there's the FA Cup or whatever was in the Millennium Stadium, and the police built a fence up across the town, and only some people were allowed in, and it was, it's very different.
Yeah.
I remember now, it was St Patrick's Day, that was it. It was St Patrick's Day with a rugby match on it.
Oh, God.
Great.
There was some sore heads the next day.
Yeah.
I was going to say, another way of looking at it, though, I mean, what I quite like sometimes is the banter that goes on because of that tribalism and the segregation and stuff like that in the football. I prefer it to be mixed, but one of the nice things you get out of it is the creative imagination of some of the football songs. I remember watching a few years ago, watching a Man City at the Etihad, watching a Man City Stoke City game. And Stoke were getting absolutely battered. I think we were winning 5-0 at that point, something like that. And the Stoke fans began to take the mickey out themselves. And it was the season that we had Robbie Fowler playing for us.
All the
Stoke fans, all the Stoke fans launched into "We all live in a Robbie Fowler house, a Robbie Fowler house, a Robbie Fowler house." It's that kind of, you get a lot of very creative, imaginative songs at a football game. And, then you compare that to, Aleksa, you were saying about the shape of the ball. Let's bring American football into that conversation. So you got...
Let's not separate ourselves by calling that football.
Exactly. It should be handball or something. It's not a football, is it? And to have the cheek about calling our national game soccer, I just, sorry to all our American friends out there, but I'm sorry, I don't get that. It's not American football. It's not.
I think we can all agree that no matter what happens, that it shouldn't be called American football, whether rugby or.
I think one thing that definitely works for rugby is the fans base. It's much friendlier. I've been to games, I've been to pubs watching rugby, and the atmosphere is much more what Ian said, camaraderie. It's a bit, yeah, and it is football fans are described as passionate, which is basically a euphemism for tribal and violent.
Hooligans is the word.
Which can be fun and interesting, but it can also be intimidating, and for outsiders especially, it can be difficult to
And being a Red Star fan, you know all about that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, Guy. It is noticeable. I mean, I think the banter and the humour and the football crowd and the singing and the chant and where the crowd sing and the euphoria, I think you do get that more at football. I mean, Sale have one chant and it goes something like, Sail.
Yeah.
Sail.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat for 15 minutes.
Wash, rinse, repeat. You don't get anything. I think
all you get in rugby is like national anthem or swing low, swing chariot.
I was going to say that, but there's something about, because I was lucky enough to go to the England-Wales match in the Six Nations just before lockdown, and 80,000, say 80,000, obviously there's a couple of Welsh fellas in there singing swing low, sweet chariot is actually quite, upraising, like the morale gets higher and it's just echoing round Twickenham as England edge closer and closer to the try line. But then again, I missed one of the tries because the queues for the bar were that big, because obviously you can actually drink in the stadium, which obviously you can't do in football.
Yeah. And are the fireworks now a thing with rugby, especially international games? I've seen on TV.
They look like the flamethrowers.
Yeah, like flamethrowers and things like that.
Not during the game.
Yeah, at the beginning. Yeah.
It'd be interesting if they did, though.
That's always interesting to me. It is obviously staged. It's it's the event really. But then I remember. I think we have a picture here when on a Red Star game, the whole stand is on fire basically, but not because anyone allowed it, but people just
I remember
fire things up.
I think some of the Turkish teams, literally, as you see them, in fact, it was a German one as well. They literally said an open training session. It looked like the edge of the pitch was on fire. There was that many flares.
Do you remember when Graham Souness ran into the middle of the pitch when he was manager of Galatasaray?
Yeah, put the flag.
Planted the flag.
Yeah.
And the uproar that caused, and the constant, it was. I mean, if we think that the English fans, well, we are passionate, but we are nowhere near at the level of violence that some of the teams around the world are at. With that side of things, I think we lead the way in terms of the way the games are policed and stuff like that. You could argue the fact they shouldn't have to be, but it is what it is. They are.
Is it football, at least, maybe in rugby, there's always been this English style of singing and being vocal about it. Where say in Italy and Turkey, that there'll always be these flares and fireworks and a bit more of that kind of a visual support, basically.
It's intimidation, isn't it, Aleksa? That's what they're going for, intimidation.
Lots of rugby fancy dress.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you watch the Six Nations, if it's a Wales game, there's always someone dressed up as a daffodil.
Yeah.
It's an England game, there's always someone dressed up as St George. I know England have got the Barmy Army and stuff with all the drums and stuff, but I don't know. I think some of my fondest memories are I went to the Rugby World Cup and just went after England beat Australia, France then beat New Zealand.
There's this idea I've been having just during this call that actually one of the things about rugby that's so good is it's so kind of tangible in the sense of, there's only like 10 teams in the world that you follow. I'm talking international ones here, like, in terms of countries and stuff. There's this big, Australia or New Zealand and
South Africa.
Yeah.
You've been doing homework, Eric.
And then there's the the
minnows, as they call them.
Well, there's the Six Nations up around Europe, and then there's the Southern Hemisphere guys down there, and there's this big thing. It's not much of the rest of the world does it, but I think just having those competitions every year, where it's 5 nations or 6 nations, autumn internationals every year, and even then you're like, definitely support Italy and half of their games because you're just like, I want Italy to win for once.
Well, it's like when Japan beat South Africa in the World Cup, like just these huge upsets. Whereas obviously with football, because so many places play it, it's not I mean, you still get the huge, big shock defeats.
Much rarer,
yeah. But it's, how excited? I can safely say I've never been excited about the Nations League or whatever they've called the new cup system.
So here's a question I'm going to pose to everybody on this call then. So, and this isn't loaded in any way. Factually, football is by far the best supported team sport that I'm aware of in the world. And yet we all agree on this call that we all like rugby in one form or another, some more than others, but we all like rugby. Why do you think the popularity of rugby is a fraction, quite frankly, of that of football? Genuine question.
I think it's
not globally, though, is it? So I was just going to say, in Wales...
I think that is the case, yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm not meaning blanket. And yes, in the total all around the world, there are countries that don't do rugby and do football and stuff. But there are places around the world, like Wales being the prime example, where for whatever reason it is, rugby is twice as popular. More people play rugby.
New Zealand, another one.
New Zealand as well.
Yeah,
even though we've got Chris Wood up front.
Probably South Africa. There are.
I think it's down to participation and access. If you go to New Zealand, it's something like 99% of schools play rugby, 1% play football. So I think it's that participation and access that started. The reason me and James, I think, like rugby is we both played rugby at school. My school did not play football. James played both, but so I think it is. And also don't forget, by the time I was 13, I was 6 foot tall, 13 stone. So I was much more agile for a rugby player than football. Still am at 58.
Yeah. But not everyone is like that, and I genuinely don't know the answer to the question why. I mean,
I think it must just be history.
I get the fact that history could be, yeah. Is it simpler? Is football easier, simpler?
It's not that it's simpler or easier. It's just what's already prevalent, I think, in a certain place and what gets passed down. So for whatever reason it is, initially football might have spread a little bit more quickly, whereas rugby's very, it's kind of Europe and colonial nations, isn't it? And cricket even more so. And where else has picked them up? Pretty much no one, but it can be massive in those areas, but also cheap and easy to play. So
I think that's probably one of the aspects is how easy it is to play. I mean, football...
Oh, I've just thought of another really good one.
Go on then.
You don't play rugby in places that have really hard floor.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Is in, if I wanted to play football, what do I need? I need a round ball. Sometimes not even that. I've played enough football games as a kid when it's been a bottle or a can.
Yeah.
And 4 jumpers. For rugby, you do need a soft surface. You need more people to be able to play it. It is, fundamentally more dangerous when you playing in the playground on a concrete floor. Whereas, you're kicking a ball about, people really aren't going to be sliding about. Whereas, a rolling maul on concrete doesn't sound like the most fun thing to be trying to
I think
navigate.
Football does spread, doesn't it? You can play it on ice, you can play it on concrete, you can play it on grass.
I always think it's lovely when you see those children in Africa wearing the shirts that have been donated from various charities, just playing in the kind of the openness there. I always think that's lovely. So, listen, should we talk about tech? Seeing this is let's put some tech into it. So rugby implemented tech,
say VAR,
a couple of years ago, and it works brilliantly. The discipline of the players is on the screen for the crowd. The referees are mic'd up. You can hear the referees talking to the players. Football followed it, and what a dog's breakfast it's made of implementation of tech.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one failure I can remember, which is the Mark Cueto try in the World Cup final where they said he went in touch, and to this day I'll say he didn't. But I think the openness that they use the technology, you can literally buy an earpiece to go into the ground with so you can actually hear exactly what the referee's saying. Half the time, the referees will make a decision in football, and before we go on to whatever VAR thinks it's doing, it's nowhere near as good in terms of how they implement the tech and how they bring people into that tech.
It's really smooth in rugby, isn't it? You don't sit around waiting for ages. It's like, within moments you can get a result for it.
Yeah, they don't mess about drawing lines on the pitch. They just literally watch it back and they put it on the big screen. So if you're in the stadium, you're not just sat there watching the screen saying decision pending. you're watching something actually say, you can see the exact replays they're showing.
I 100% agree. I think the way that rugby have used tech is far superior to that of football. I think football has some more fundamental issues that kind of cause that. So, I think there's a lack of respect for referees in the first place. That's the first thing. They seem frightened to really clamp down on that. They couldn't possibly have a microphone on the referee because of all the effing and jeffing that would be going on the pitch. And I think they're frightened for probably for the tribal reasons we've discussed before, to allow it to be shown on the big screen, because when there's a decision that is one way or the other, it could go either way, and there are plenty of those, even with VAR or even in the rugby. The football fans seem to take it far less graciously than the rugby fans, and going back to the mentality and the different, probably types of people that go to football.
Is there a problem also with some of the rules of football, because they're not really? I mean, they're too vague. The tech can't help with some of these things, really. I mean, in terms of the rules of handball now in a penalty area. I don't know really.
I mean, everyone obviously goes back to the offside rule in footballs. Trying to describe that. These days, it's what's active, what's offside and active and stuff. And the rules need to be tightened, so there's less grey areas. So it's just.
I think the same applies to rugby, though, James, in offside and stuff like that. I mean, I do watch rugby, and even I struggle sometimes with the offside rule there and how it's interpreted. It's just the lack of, it's the respect shown to the officials by the fans and the players is different in rugby than it is in football, and I think that's the big problem. If I was to answer why that's the issue, that is.
I was going to say the same thing about forward passes in rugby, because it's no longer as simple. It's not as simple as the ball went forward, is it? Because there's this thing about momentum and blah blah blah. And so it is a bit grey there as well. But it's never
the rules in rugby are quite technical, but I think the points of contention in football make that more of an issue than they are in rugby.
Yeah.
I think if you watch the way that the games are ref, there's a constant dialogue between the players and the referee in rugby. The referee actually helps coach the game. If you notice, when there's a scrum, the referee will be telling the backs to don't stray offside, keep onside, just to keep the game flowing. And there's much more, the referee is much more integrated into the game in rugby than they are in football, to be honest. You look at someone like Nigel Owens, and if you go on YouTube, you can find some of the clips. There's an amazing clip of Martin Johnson calling Nigel Owens sir and requesting an explanation of why he'd interpreted something in a certain way. And it went against him. But as Eric has said, Johnson just took the decision and walked away. But there was definitely a kind of a respect between the player and you just don't get that in football.
Yeah, I have something to ask. Maybe I can be a bit educated in rugby. But one of the reasons I really enjoy watching football, because football can be played in so many different ways. And there's some cultures around football, how it's played. For example, if you look at Brazilian football, it's all like ballet, and people like dancing around the pitch.
You mean falling over?
And if you look at Italian football, it's like chess, really. I mean, it's very positional, and you can see the strategy and thinking went into it. And you look at the English one, which is probably more like rugby, very physical, and maybe borrowed from rugby. Is there something like that in rugby? Can you recognize this?
Definitely. There's I guess England kind of maybe play one way, which is generally more carry the ball heavy and get it to the line. There's others like kick the ball, or New Zealand very open play, aren't they? Just constantly running and diving between stuff, and there's
the French as well. It's I think they mentioned it in the game, which was a brilliant game for everyone gets to watch it. It was on Amazon Prime. They showed it was the final of the Autumn Cup, and they how France played very fluid, very very few times, much as possible, avoiding having rucks and that sort of thing. It's very much about offloads, trying to break through an individual, whereas obviously England's very much a team, very physical, and relying on obviously back in the day it was developed, it really went in hard on the kicking game with Wilkinson in 2003.
Big differences. Whether you want to keep running, whether you want to play for set pieces, whether you want to carry the ball or pass the ball or quick turnovers or build up your whole team behind it. It does change.
I think there's. So go on in.
I was going to say, it is. There is that cultural side to it. I mean, the whole thing about the French national team is that every 3 years they produce a brilliant team, then they just collapse because a lot of infighting and falling out with each other. They have a kind of history of that. Whereas, what Aleksa says is very interesting. Actually, it's a good point. There's the brawn of the English, which has kind of been our trademark, but the kind of the teamwork and the flair of the All Blacks, and Australians have generally run the ball. But it's strange, isn't it, how there is that polarity that between the southern and northern hemisphere as well. The southern hemisphere are very, very small populations. New Zealand, a population of 3 million, but produce the All Blacks, the all-time outstanding international team. So it
sounds like to me, Ian, after what you just said there, that and what Aleksa said, that the culture of the company is pretty similar in football as it is in rugby. You're saying about the French. Well, I remember not too long ago, the French football team having a massive infighting that caused them to get knocked out in the qualifying stages of the World Cup and that kind of thing. And as Aleksa pointed out, the English football team on the pitch are definitely more physical than some of the South American more technical teams, and it sounds like rugby and football in both scenarios are quite similar. It sounds like it's the culture of the country as opposed to the sport.
Yeah, we're kind of losing that with the Premier League, aren't we? As we're kind of, the typical English defender or the English centre forward as not as prevalent as they used to be. Rugby is definitely levelling up, though. I mean, although football is played in probably 165 of the countries around the world, you're seeing countries like Japan, Romania really coming to the fore now. So you've got the traditional strongholds in rugby, but globally it is becoming more of a global sport. And the equivalent of the Six Nations that the Southern Hemisphere play, Argentina have joined that group of the traditional tri-nations of the All Blacks, the Aussies, and South Africa rather. So it is changing. But I don't know, as a spectacle, as Eric says, I just think you can watch a rugby game for 80 minutes and you've got all the rugby players trying not to look injured for 80 minutes. You watch a football game and you've got the footballers trying to look injured for 90 minutes.
I mean, I don't think I'll ever forget the video of Neymar. He's a big wimp anyway. But he, got tackled. I think he rolled 8 times after a tackle. Got as soon as the referee ignored him, he got straight up and ran over to the ref to complain. So obviously didn't get that hurt. And that's the thing that's wound me up most recently in football is it's just the diving and the pretending, and it just does me head in.
There's another thing of football, I think, which is kind of a differentiator. I mean, we as a kind of a human race, we do everything we do useful is mainly with our hands, be it, the coding or the, bricklaying or art, painting, things like that. Football is played with feet, and that kind of art with feet is not something you can see in a lot of places. So it's kind of different. And I appreciate it more, probably because I'm rubbish at that. I was always a bit more of a defender like Vidic. I can help things.
Not how about you 6'7".
Yeah. But I think that kind of what you can do with your feet is just amazing, really, when you look at some footballers like Messi or Ronaldo or whoever.
Yeah.
Isn't that where Peter Crouch defies logic, doesn't it?
Exactly.
With his both feet and his head, but he's 6'7". How does that happen? Underrated player, that guy. Very underrated.
It's the classic thing. He's got a good touch for a big man.
Yeah.
It's literally that's what it is. He can put his head on it, but then suddenly he does something with his feet. I remember Crouch scored. Was it when he was playing at Liverpool, or was it when he was at Stoke and scored an absolute worldie?
Volley.
And then goes.
It was against City actually when he was playing for. I can't remember if it was Liverpool or Stoke, but I remember it. I was there. I was at the Etihad.
Yeah, his chest and his knee, and then just turned and smashed it over. But
obviously, Crouch is the exception. But is there then a physique to football? Because obviously you got basketball where everyone is 7 feet tall and skinny.
Yeah.
And then rugby is very much different, where you get a lot of big guys, but you get your small hookers and whatever as well, don't you? So
Well, that's
But
kind
isn't
of
it?
as well.
Is football a certain thing?
I think there's a physique to your position. So if you're a defender, central defender, you're generally over 6'2", and well built, and so on. Whereas if you are a midfielder, you might have a lower centre of gravity, allows you to turn quicker and pass the ball, and just get round the opposition in midfield. And again, if you're up front, it can vary. You can have people like Peter Crouch, who is just an excellent centre forward. Then you've got people like Aguero and Michael Owen, and that kind of stature, very small but agile. And
what's the football version of Genolomu?
Ronaldo, probably.
But the best football players are that sort of smallish build, like magicians with the ball, like Messi, like Maradona, like, I don't know, that kind of really small, but they can do with the ball whatever they want. A low center of gravity, so they can also run as well. And
I think you get far more differences in football in terms of you can have defenders. Look at Nathan Ake at City. He's what, 5 foot something. He's renowned for his small. That's not including his hair, because obviously he's got a bit of a throw. Whereas in rugby, you're not going to really get a small forward. And I mean, the backs can be a little bit different. They're getting bigger and faster and far more athletic.
Yeah, that's changed a little bit. That's changed a little bit. If you look at Tom Curry, who he's 20, who plays for Sale in England, and he plays in the back row. He's not a big unit, but he's very athletic. And you rewind back 6-8 years when we had Chabal playing, who was a man mounting. So the physique has changed. I just think someone like Jason Robinson epitomised rugby to me. He was athletic, he was strong, he was dynamic, he was fast. And rugby, again, the skill sets are slightly different. I mean, I think you have to be good with the ball. You have to be destructive with the ball to be a good rugby player when you've got it in your hands. But you've also got to be a good defender and be good tackling. So rugby, though they have specialised positions, the overall skills a bit more balanced. Whereas football, I think you are kind of, if you're number 6, you're number 10, or number 1, then you are put in that position for a reason.
Just keeping on time, because actually we've gone over what we usually do already. So I will go around and ask for final thoughts from every person, or a closing statement as to why they think their sport, rugby or football, is better. So, Aleksa, do you want to start us off with a final thought and before we finish for Christmas?
I'll definitely admit that I had to learn much more about rugby. I enjoyed a few games in the pub and a few at Edgeley Park, but probably not nearly enough. But I did enjoy hundreds of football games, both either on TV or Etihad or other places as well. And just the way my heart races when I watch football is why I kind of feel football kind of edges it for me. Just
Eric?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's just tension. Rugby has this tension that's palpable and builds, and I just don't see it in football at all. It's far more a game of chance and setting up chances and taking them on a percentage rather than one particular event. Yeah.
Mr. Raymond?
Without risk of sounding like I'm sitting on the fence, that they're both great games. I enjoy watching them both. If you were to push me, then it would be football, because that's what I've been brought up on. Although I used to go and watch my dad every Saturday morning, Old Salians, and he used to play literally every weekend. So hopefully I've got a reasonably balanced view. I just for the same reasons as Eric, but the opposite way around, to be honest. I get and like Aleksa, it really gets me excited and gets the heart pounding. I just don't think you can beat a game of football in that regard, but I get why other people really like it.
Ian?
Well, I'd say rugby union rather than rugby league, but that's a whole different podcast.
That's next Christmas's podcast.
For me, it's rugby, because, as I said, one of us really, they were passionate about the football and, feel more euphoria and more pain when Burnley win or lose than Sale did. But for me, I think, like Eric said, if I can watch a game of rugby as a neutral, I find it very hard to watch a game of football as a neutral. I just almost don't care. So I think just for me, the edginess that rugby has, there's always something about to happen, is really what gets it for me.
And I'm going to be completely neutral, so it's nice and even. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I think, especially at an international level, I would always choose rugby. I find watching England boring. Football-wise, don't really care about it, whereas I don't think much will beat a last-minute golden point kicking or a sort of penalty shootout in rugby, or the 2003 World Cup when it was extra time and Wilkinson's dropout. I enjoyed England beating Germany 5-1, but I just don't think it compares. But it's far easier to go and have a kickabout with your mates than it is to go and have a game of rugby. So, well, folks, I think that's that for 2020. We've finished our podcast. So thank you, everyone, for your efforts in helping put together. And in the new year, we'll get back to doing some recordings. So don't worry, you'll all be involved. No one's got kicked off yet. So
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.